you want to hire the people and bring the people into your enterprise at the right times and at the right stages. Like, for example, I was the guilty of this. I would be banging on the table. I remember once with my co-founders, like we were promoting developers to run marketing. I mean, I thought it was ridiculous, right? In retrospect, it was the right thing to do, because I'm like, can we just go on LinkedIn, find someone whose title is VP of marketing at a company like Nike or Starbucks, and hire that person? And we did, and it was an absolute disaster, right? As you can imagine. Not only did they not understand our domain space, they wanted to have 14 forms. I'm exaggerating for effect. Maybe it was 13 forms to fill out before you run a marketing event, as opposed to 14 forms. But bureaucratic, big company mentality, as opposed to rough and tumble, nimble, like from a startup perspective, right? So, and then the other thing about that is, we would always want to hire somebody from okay, what's a successful startup? Like, let's go hire someone from Google, right? When we're 5 people. Well, someone who works at Google now, when they have 100, they just announced that they hired their 150,000th employee. Like, honestly, you don't impress me if you're employee number 151,000 at Google. Sorry, you don't. Like, you can interview well. You probably have a fancy degree. You're probably smarter than me, right? You probably make more money than I do. But you don't impress me you impress me for that side of things, right? That you went to Stanford and got an MBA or whatever it is you do, right? But you don't impress me from an entrepreneurial standpoint, right? Like, what impresses me from an entrepreneurial standpoint is all of you, right? Like the folks that just are in the trenches doing it. So I said, you don't want to hire someone from Google as your 5th employee, unless they were employee number 5 at Google, and those people don't exist. They own small nations, right? Or maybe they own planets. I don't know at this point, right? So I learned a lot of that. And then when it comes to regulatory, definitely learned a lot, just about a lot of these businesses after Zagat were cross-border, and either had contractors cross-border, or lines of businesses that were in other countries, or we were acquired by companies in other countries. So I learned a lot about the internationalization of your business, which was a really amazing lesson to learn. And then, eventually, especially if you have developers in other countries. So I learned about managing remote staff. Now that's all cool. Oh yeah, we all do work from home and this. I was doing that in the 90s, right? And in the early 2000s, right? So learning, and it was harder back then, right? Obviously you didn't have as many tools as you have today, but definitely learned about that. And then lastly, you mentioned regulatory is, we definitely had a company. When we sold the company, we were pulled in front of the regulator.